The endless black of space was calm, almost peaceful. Stars glowed like silver dust scattered across a dark ocean. Far away from the battlefront, a single human hospital ship drifted slowly between the stars. It was called Mercy Dawn. Unlike warships, it carried no weapons, no shields strong enough to fight. Its purpose was simple: to heal the wounded, to protect the weak, and to remind the galaxy that humanity still cared for life, even in the middle of war. Inside, the atmosphere was soft and quiet. Bright white corridors stretched like veins across the ship. The gentle sound of medical machines hummed in the background. In one room, doctors moved carefully around an injured pilot, repairing burns on his chest. In another room, a nurse whispered kind words to a frightened child who had lost her family. Everywhere there was pain, but there was also hope. No one expected death to find them here. But among the distant shadows of the stars, something dark stirred. Hidden in silence, alien warships slowly moved into position. Their hulls were jagged like blades meant for cutting. Their captains looked at the hospital ship not as a sanctuary but as a target. To them, humanity's weakness was clear. A ship with no weapons was not sacred, it was prey. There was no warning, no message, no chance for mercy. The first strike came without sound, only light, a flash that tore through the void. A plasma missile slammed into the side of the hospital ship. The comm corridors shook violently. Walls trembled, lights flickered, alarms screamed. A peaceful ship of healing had turned into a coffin of fire in a single heartbeat. Patients screamed as they were thrown from their beds. Medical tools clattered to the floor. Nurses rushed to cover the injured with their own bodies, trying to shield them from flying metal. The air filled with the stench of smoke and burning wires. On the bridge, the captain's face turned pale as he shouted, "We're under attack! Brace for impact!" His crew scrambled in panic, their hands flying over controls that were never built for war. Another explosion thundered through the hull. The second missile struck near the engines. The ship groaned like a dying beast. Fire spread down the corridor, devouring everything in its path. Oxygen alarms wailed. Red emergency lights painted the once white walls in the color of blood. The captain tried desperately to call for help. "This is Mercy Dawn, a hospital ship. We carry only civilians and wounded, requesting immediate assistance." His voice cracked, but the stars gave no answer. Only static filled the comms. The aliens had jammed their signals. Fear swallowed the crew. The helpless cries of patients echoed through the ship. Soldiers who had once fought proudly now lay weak and broken, unable to stand, unable to fight. Mothers clutched their children close. Doctors shouted instructions, trying to stop the chaos. But everyone knew the truth: this was not a battle. This was an execution. Then came the worst sound of all: the clawing hiss of boarding hooks. The alien warships had moved closer, attaching themselves to the helpless vessel. Dark, metallic claws cut through the hull like knives. Sparks flew as doors were forced open. Through the smoke and the screaming, alien soldiers marched in. Their armor glistened like black stone. Their weapons shone with cruel energy. They laughed. To them, this was easy. There was no honor here, no risk. It was like hunting trapped animals. They fired at random, striking walls, smashing equipment, terrifying the helpless. A nurse dropped to her knees, shielding a child as the aliens walked past, mocking her fear. The hospital ship shook again. This time, not from missiles, but from boots. Alien boots echoing in every corridor. But deep inside the ship, far from the bridge and far from the flames, one man sat alone in a small lab. He was not a captain. He was not a soldier. He was a scientist, a man the galaxy had once feared. He had been brilliant, too brilliant. The human military had studied his inventions but locked them away. They said he was reckless, dangerous. They said his ideas were too unpredictable, too sharp. He was given no place in the fleet, no place in the war. They had pushed him into silence, hiding him away on a hospital ship, where his mind would do no harm. Now the alarms shook his lab. Smoke curled under the door. He heard the screams, the explosions, the footsteps of enemies drawing closer. But while others panicked, he remained still. His eyes, cold and sharp, studied the chaos. "They think this ship is weak," he whispered. His voice was calm, almost like a doctor giving a quiet diagnosis. "They are wrong." He looked around at the tools of healing, the machines built to repair organs, the drones designed to close wounds, the energy fields meant to stabilize failing hearts. His mind turned faster than the fire spreading across the ship. In those machines, he did not see weakness. He saw weapons. While the aliens advanced, confident and cruel, the man began to work. His hands moved quickly, pulling wires, twisting circuits, reprogramming drones. Each device that was once a tool of life began to change under his touch. "If medicine cannot save them," he said softly, his eyes glowing with determination, "then I will save them another way." Outside, the hospital ship burned. Patients screamed. The captain begged the stars for help. Alien laughter echoed through the halls. But none of them knew what was about to awaken. In the silence of one small lab, a dangerous human mind had made its decision. And soon, the attackers would discover that they had walked into a trap, one far deadlier than any weapon they had ever faced. Smoke spread through the corridors of the hospital ship like a slow, choking fog. The cries of the wounded mixed with the heavy steps of alien soldiers as they marched forward with cruel confidence. The Mercy Dawn shook with every impact, yet deep inside, in a quiet medical lab, one man worked in silence. He was no soldier. He wore no uniform of rank. He was a man who had once been called a genius too dangerous to be trusted. Years ago, the human military had studied his designs for weapons. His inventions were brilliant, machines that could outthink enemy ships, traps that could turn battlefields upside down. But his mind frightened even his own commanders. They whispered that he had no limit, that he might one day destroy friend and foe alike. And so, he had been pushed away, buried inside a hospital ship where his skills would be safe. He was ordered to work only on healing technology, machines that repaired damaged organs, drones that carried medicine, scanners that found sickness hidden in the body. They thought by giving him tools of peace, they could silence his darker ideas. But now, as fire burned around him and innocent lives screamed for help, that silence broke. The genius stood slowly from his chair. His eyes were cold, sharp like blades of glass. On the table before him were medical drones, small machines with smooth metal arms, built to heal wounds. He ran his hand across one. "You were made to save life," he whispered. "But tonight you will defend it." He moved quickly, his mind racing faster than the alarms blaring across the ship. With a few adjustments, the healing lasers of the drones became cutting beams. The gentle injectors that carried medicine were filled with acid instead. Their flight programs, once meant to hover softly over patients, were rewritten to strike with speed. One by one, the machines of healing became soldiers of war. In the corridor outside, the first squad of aliens advanced. They laughed at the weak humans who ran in fear. They pointed their weapons at nurses, at children, enjoying the terror they caused. But before they could fire, a sharp whine filled the air. From the shadows above, a swarm of drones descended. Their arms flashed. Lasers sliced through alien armor. Needles injected burning acid into veins. The soldiers screamed, their confidence turning into panic. What they thought were helpless machines of medicine had turned into weapons sharper than blades. The survivors stumbled back, shouting in their own language, warning others, "The humans fight with machines. The hospital is cursed." The genius watched from a small screen inside his lab. His lips curved into the faintest smile. "This is only the beginning," he murmured. He was not reckless now. He was precise. Every step, every trap was part of a bigger design. He reprogrammed the ship's automatic doors, locking them in sudden bursts. Some aliens found themselves trapped inside burning rooms, screaming as the fire consumed them. Others chased humans down a corridor, only for the floor panels to collapse, sending them crashing into storage bays filled with pressurized gas. The genius triggered the release, one spark, and the aliens were thrown back in a deadly explosion. The hospital ship, once a sanctuary, was becoming a maze of traps. But he was not finished. He hacked into the intercom systems, sending ghostly voices echoing through the halls. To the aliens, it sounded as if hundreds of humans were waiting in ambush. They grew paranoid, firing at shadows, wasting their energy. Fear spread among them like a disease. Meanwhile, the patients and crew who had been close to despair now found hope. They heard the screams of the aliens, saw their enemies falling one by one. Whispers spread among them. Someone is protecting us. Someone is fighting back. The captain, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, asked in shock, "Who is doing this? We have no soldiers on board." But no one answered. The truth remained hidden in the shadows of the lab. The genius did not seek thanks. He did not seek glory. He only whispered to himself as he built his next weapon. "If I must become the monster they fear, then so be it. To protect life, I will use death." The alien commanders grew furious. Reports poured in from squads who had been slaughtered by drones, traps, and illusions. They ordered more troops inside, determined to crush whatever resistance lived on the ship. But with every soldier that entered, the genius grew stronger. He learned their movements. He studied their tactics. He bent the hospital ship itself into his weapon. What the aliens did not understand was that they were no longer fighting humans. They were walking through the mind of one man, a deadly genius who turned every corridor into a blade. The patients huddled in fear as battles raged around them. But slowly, hope returned to their eyes. The helpless had become survivors. The hunted had found a protector. And still, the man in the lab worked without rest. His face was calm, almost emotionless, but his eyes burned with a fire no enemy could extinguish. The Mercy Dawn was bleeding, burning, broken. But inside its wounds, something far more dangerous than missiles or cannons had awakened. The aliens had attacked a hospital ship. They thought they had found weakness. Instead, they had awakened a mind sharp enough to change the fate of the galaxy. The Mercy Dawn shook with every blast. Flames licked the walls, alarms screamed, and smoke choked the air. The alien soldiers moved forward, row by row, certain that their victory was close. To them, it was only a matter of time before every human on this hospital ship was dead. But what they did not know was that the ship was no longer theirs to conquer. It belonged to the mind of one man, the deadly genius who had already turned healing machines into weapons. And now he was ready to go further. Inside his hidden lab, the genius worked with terrifying focus. His hands moved quickly across broken panels, wires, and machines. He did not see chaos, he saw opportunity. Every fire, every broken door, every piece of scrap metal was another part of his puzzle. "The ship is not dying," he whispered. "It is changing." He opened a map of the corridors on his screen. To the untrained eye, it was a simple layout of hallways and rooms. But to him, it was a battlefield waiting to be designed. He began to draw red lines, marking choke points where enemies could be trapped. He marked storage rooms where pressurized gas tanks could become explosives. He marked air vents where drones could strike unseen. Piece by piece, he reshaped the Mercy Dawn into a labyrinth of death. The aliens marched forward, laughing, their weapons ready. The first squad entered a wide corridor filled with smoke. They thought it was empty. They did not notice the drones waiting above, hidden in the haze. With a soft hum, the machines dropped like vultures. Their beams cut through armor. Their needles injected burning acid. The soldiers screamed, their laughter gone. The survivors tried to retreat, but the doors behind them slammed shut. The genius had locked them with a single keystroke. There was no way out. Within minutes, silence returned, leaving only broken bodies behind. Elsewhere, another squad stormed through the medical wing. They expected terrified humans. Instead, they found a long hallway with glowing lights. The walls hissed, and suddenly streams of freezing gas burst out. The aliens stumbled, their armor cracking under the sudden cold. Before they could recover, sparks from broken wires ignited the gas. A wave of fire rushed through the corridor, swallowing them whole. The genius watched it all from his screen. His expression did not change. His eyes were sharp, calm, merciless. He was not celebrating victory. He was calculating the next move. On the bridge, the captain and his officers struggled to understand what was happening. Alien squads were reporting heavy losses. Their voices echoed through the comms before being cut short by screams. The captain whispered, "How is this possible? We have no soldiers." The crew looked at one another in shock. Some whispered of ghosts. Others believed the ship itself had come alive to protect them. No one guessed the truth, that a single man was bending the entire ship to his will. The aliens, however, began to feel it. Fear crept into their ranks. They were trained to fight human armies, to face ships filled with soldiers and cannons. But this was different. Every corner was a trap. Every machine was an enemy. The humans they hunted were weak, but the hospital itself had become a nightmare. "Be careful," one alien commander shouted to his troops. "The humans are tricking us." But it was not the humans. It was one human. The genius increased the pressure. He hacked into the alien comms, replaying their own screams back at them. Soldiers froze, hearing what sounded like their fallen comrades begging for mercy. Others fired wildly at shadows, wasting energy as panic spread. The genius whispered to himself as he worked, "Fear is the strongest weapon. Make them doubt every step, and they will destroy themselves." And destroy themselves they did. In one corridor, two alien squads met in the smoke. Confused and frightened, they mistook each other for enemies. Blaster fire lit the hallway as they tore into one another, leaving nothing but silence when the smoke cleared. Meanwhile, the patients and crew huddled together in hidden rooms, listening to the distant sounds of battle. They had been certain death was near, but now hope began to grow. They whispered, "Someone is fighting for us. Someone is protecting us." A child asked a nurse, "Is it the soldiers who saved us?" The nurse could only shake her head. She had no answer. But deep down, she prayed for the unseen protector who was turning despair into survival. In the alien flagship, the commanders grew angry. Reports showed their troops dying in corridors, trapped in burning rooms, cut down by machines. One commander slammed his fist on the table. "It is a hospital ship. How can it kill us like this?" None of them could see the face of the man responsible, the genius who had turned mercy into terror. As more alien troops boarded, the traps grew deadlier. Floors collapsed into storage bays where tanks exploded like bombs. Drones cut through darkness like flying blades. Fire, gas, and smoke worked together as the genius directed them, weaving chaos into a deadly design. The aliens had come to hunt. Now they were the hunted. By the end of the hour, hundreds of them lay dead inside the hospital ship. Their weapons had been useless against the mind of one man. The genius leaned back in his chair, his face pale but his eyes glowing. He was not satisfied. He knew the battle was far from over. The flagship still loomed outside, its cannons ready to finish what the boarding squads had failed to do. But he also knew something else. If he could turn a hospital ship into a fortress, then he could strike at the heart of the enemy itself. He whispered one last sentence as the lights flickered around him. "The trap is set. Now let them come." The alien flagship floated outside the burning hospital ship, its massive hull glowing with cruel light. From its command deck, alien officers watched the battle with growing unease. The Mercy Dawn should have fallen within minutes. It was only a hospital ship, weak, unarmed, helpless. Yet already, dozens of boarding squads had vanished inside, their signals cut off, their voices ending in screams. At first, the commanders believed it was resistance from the crew. Perhaps the humans had hidden weapons. But the reports that returned were strange. Soldiers spoke of doors that locked behind them, of drones striking with surgical precision, of corridors that turned into firestorms. The words came in broken shouts before silence swallowed them. Fear began to spread, not among the humans, but among the invaders. Inside the flagship's war room, one alien captain growled, "This is impossible. They are medics, not warriors." Another officer replied in a trembling voice, "Then explain why our troops are not returning." The commander slammed a clawed fist on the table. "Enough excuses. Send more troops." And so, more soldiers were forced into the corridors of the Mercy Dawn. But as each group entered, the same story repeated itself. They vanished into smoke and fire. They screamed into comms before their voices turned to static. The genius inside the hospital ship was not only fighting, he was studying. Every new squad gave him more information. How the aliens moved, how they reacted, where their weaknesses lay. He adjusted his traps with each encounter, making them deadlier, faster, more precise. He sat in his lab, surrounded by smoke and sparks, his eyes locked on the glowing maps before him. They are not soldiers here, he whispered to himself. They are rats inside my maze. And the maze was shrinking. On the flagship, whispers began among the crew. They spoke of curses, of humans who could summon death without weapons. Some refused to look at the screens showing the burning ship. Others made strange signs with their hands, ancient rituals of protection. Even the alien soldiers waiting for orders began to hesitate. They had seen comrades march into the hospital ship, strong and confident, only to vanish forever. Rumors spread like poison. The humans are not weak. One of them is a demon. One human can kill us all. The commanders tried to silence the fear, but fear is not so easily killed. Back inside the Mercy Dawn, the genius pushed harder. He had turned medical drones into blades and corridors into fire traps, but now he reached deeper. He hacked into the ship's broken systems and found the emergency surgical lasers. They had been built to cut flesh with precision, to save lives. Now, they became weapons of execution. Alien soldiers burst into an operating room, only to be sliced apart by beams of light that moved like the hands of invisible surgeons. Their screams echoed through the halls, carried into the ears of their comrades still waiting to enter. The genius also played with sound. He hacked into the intercom, projecting the cries of the dying through the walls. To the aliens, it was as if the ship itself was screaming. Every echo made them jump. Every shadow became an enemy. Their discipline cracked. They began firing at each other in the dark. For the humans hiding in sealed rooms, hope grew stronger. Nurses held the hands of children and whispered, "He is still fighting for us." They didn't know who he was, but they knew someone was out there, turning despair into survival. The captain of the Mercy Dawn stood on the bridge, listening to the distant chaos. He had once believed all was lost. Now, though the ship still burned, his eyes carried a spark of faith. "We may survive this," he whispered. "We may survive because of him." On the flagship, the alien commander paced the deck. His face, usually filled with arrogance, now showed doubt. He barked orders to attack again, but fewer soldiers obeyed. Some shook their heads, refusing to step into the cursed ship. Others pretended their weapons needed repair. The fear was spreading faster than the commander's anger. Reports arrived from scouts outside the battle. Other alien ships in the fleet had overheard the screams on open channels. They whispered among themselves, sharing stories of a single human who could kill entire squads with only a hospital at his side. For the first time, the aliens looked at humanity not as prey, but as something unpredictable, dangerous. The genius knew he could not hold forever. His body was exhausted. His lungs coughed from the smoke. His hands shook from hours of work without rest. Yet his mind remained clear, sharper than ever. He knew he had already won something far greater than survival. He had planted fear in the hearts of the enemy. He leaned back in his chair, watching the chaos unfold on his monitors. "They came to destroy hope," he whispered. "But now they carry fear back to their fleet." And fear, he knew, was a weapon that spread faster than fire. By the time the next boarding order was given, half the alien troops refused to go. The commander roared in anger, calling them cowards. But even he could not hide the unease in his voice. His soldiers no longer believed in victory. They believed in the story of a single human who turned weakness into death. The galaxy had not yet seen the end of this battle, but already, whispers were spreading. The humans are not fragile. The humans are not helpless. If one man can turn a hospital into a fortress, what will happen when all of humanity stands together? And as the aliens hesitated, the genius prepared his next move. The trap was working. The fear was growing. The fate of the galaxy had begun to change. The Mercy Dawn floated like a broken ghost in the dark sea of space. Fire burned across its hull. Entire sections of the ship were crushed. Inside, the air smelled of smoke, blood, and fear. Yet against all odds, The hospital ship still lived. And so did its people. The alien soldiers had expected victory. Instead, they had found nightmares. Traps had swallowed them. Machines had cut them down. Even their commanders, proud and merciless, were shaken. For every squad that entered, only silence returned. But the genius knew the truth. His tricks could not last forever. The hospital ship was dying. Oxygen was running low. Power cells were nearly empty. The survivors could not hide much longer. He leaned over the glowing map of the ship, his fingers trembling with exhaustion. His body wanted to collapse, but his mind was sharper than ever. If this continues, he whispered, we will all burn here together. There was only one path left. Attack the enemy flagship itself. The thought was insane. The flagship was massive, armored with shields and weapons strong enough to destroy entire fleets. And yet, the genius's eyes burned with certainty. He had studied the enemy too long, listened to their movements, mapped their patterns. He knew the flagship carried the command core, the heart of the fleet. If it fell, the others would scatter. He stood slowly, coughing from the smoke. Around him, the few drones that survived hovered, waiting for orders. They were broken, patched together with wires and scars, but they still obeyed him. This ship cannot be saved, he said quietly, but we can make sure it is not forgotten. On the bridge, the captain staggered to his feet as the genius entered. The crew turned to stare. Their eyes were filled with exhaustion, but also with awe. They knew by now who had been fighting for them, who had turned a hospital into a fortress. It was you, the captain said. The genius did not deny it. He walked past the stunned officers and tapped a finger on the holographic screen. The enemy flagship glowed red, like a predator circling its prey. If we destroy that, he said, they will break. The fleet will run. The officers gasped. Destroy the flagship? With what weapons? We have nothing left. The genius's eyes narrowed. We do have something left. A weapon they cannot predict. He revealed his plan. It was madness, using the ship's failing reactor, combining it with pressurized medical gases, and directing it through the damaged engines. The hospital ship would become a weapon of fire, a storm of energy so unstable that even the flagship's shields could not resist. The captain shook his head. That would kill us all. The genius's voice was cold. If they live, we die anyway. If we strike, we might save the galaxy. Silence filled the bridge. No one could argue with him. The truth was brutal, but clear. Meanwhile, in the flagship, alien commanders argued. Some demanded more soldiers be sent in. Others refused, warning of curses and traps. Fear poisoned their unity. Reports from across the fleet showed hesitation. Ships moving slower, captains whispering doubts. The commander of the flagship slammed his claws on the table. We will end this. Fire all weapons. Burn the humans completely. The flagship prepared its cannons, their cores glowing with deadly light. One more strike, and the Mercy Dawn would vanish into ashes. Inside the hospital ship, survivors gathered in silence. They knew their lives now balanced on the edge of madness. Nurses held children close, whispering prayers. Doctors stood by their patients, refusing to leave them even in death. The genius walked among them, calm but unyielding. One nurse cried out, "Please, don't do this. There must be another way." The genius stopped. For the first time, his voice softened. "I am not doing this to die. I am doing this so that you may live. Even if I fail, humanity will not be forgotten. The galaxy will remember that we were never helpless." He returned to the lab. His hands moved quickly, faster than his shaking body should allow. He linked the reactor to the engine controls, rerouted emergency lines, and armed the unstable gases. Warning alarms screamed in protest, but he ignored them. His eyes never blinked. His mind never slowed. The drones hovered around him, as if waiting for his final command. Finally, he looked at the glowing red on the map, the alien flagship. "One chance," he whispered. "One strike to change everything." On the flagship, the commander raised his hand to give the order. Cannons were charged, ready to fire. But before he could speak, the Mercy Dawn moved. The dying hospital ship roared to life. Engines that had been silent suddenly burned with fire. The broken vessel turned sharply, facing the flagship head-on. Its lights glowed like the eyes of a wounded beast refusing to die. The alien soldiers froze in shock. It's moving. The hospital is attacking. On the bridge, the commander's voice shook. Impossible. They cannot. But they could. Inside the Mercy Dawn, the genius pressed the final command. His voice was steady, even as the walls shook around him. This is the turning point. The engines ignited with blinding light. The reactor surged. Energy built to a level no ship should ever carry. The hospital ship, once a place of mercy, now charged forward like a weapon of vengeance. And in that moment, the fate of the battle, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy, balanced on the edge of a single human mind. The stars burned silently as two ships faced each other. The broken human hospital ship Mercy Dawn and the massive alien flagship. One looked weak, torn apart by fire and smoke. The other stood tall, armored, glowing with the power of 1,000 cannons. Yet in that moment, it was not the stronger ship that the galaxy feared. It was the weaker one. Inside the Mercy Dawn, the deadly genius stood at the controls. His eyes were calm, though his hands shook from exhaustion. Around him, warning alarms screamed. The reactor core was unstable. The engines overheated, the hull seconds from tearing apart. Still, he did not blink. He had calculated every detail, every possible outcome. He knew there was only one chance. All of you, he whispered to himself, watch closely. Today you will learn what one human mind can do. On the alien flagship, panic spread through the crew. They had never seen a hospital ship move like this, charging forward with suicidal speed. Soldiers looked at their commanders with wide, fearful eyes. They are coming straight at us, one shouted. Destroy them now, the commander roared. Cannons glowed, missiles locked, and beams of energy fired across space. Bolts of plasma slammed into the Mercy Dawn, tearing metal apart. Explosions burst across its sides. But the ship did not slow. It burned, but it kept moving, like a wounded beast refusing to fall. The genius gritted his teeth, holding the course steady. Every hit made the deck shake. Sparks rained from the ceiling. A beam of fire cut across the bridge, knocking the captain unconscious. Still, the hospital ship roared forward. At last, the genius reached the critical point. The reactor core glowed white-hot. Energy surged through the engines, far beyond their limits. The ship was seconds away from tearing itself apart. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, and memories flashed before him of when people had called him dangerous, of when his own commanders had rejected his ideas. They had said he was too reckless, too unpredictable. And yet here he was, the only shield between survival and extinction. He whispered, "This is why I exist." Then he pressed the final command. The Mercy Dawn unleashed its fury. A blinding wave of energy burst from its engines, a storm brighter than the suns around it. The ship became a spear of light, tearing across space and slamming into the alien flagship's shields. The shields cracked. For a heartbeat, they held. Then they shattered like glass. The energy wave tore into the flagship's hull. Cannons exploded one by one, ripped apart from the inside. Armor melted. Entire sections of the ship turned into fire. Alien soldiers screamed as the floor beneath them gave way, pulling them into the burning void. The commander roared in disbelief, clutching the rail as his warship broke around him. It cannot be. This is only a hospital ship. But the truth was clear. It was not the ship that made the difference. It was the human who commanded it. The blast spread beyond the flagship. Smaller ships in the fleet shook violently as the shockwave ripped through them. Some engines failed. Others broke apart completely. Those who survived stared in horror at the impossible sight, their mighty flagship, the pride of their fleet, breaking into pieces under the attack of a single dying vessel. Fear spread faster than the fire. Across the fleet, voices shouted over the comms. Fall back! Retreat! Captains turned their ships away, terrified of what else this human might do. If he could destroy a flagship with a hospital ship, what could humanity's real warships do? The thought alone was enough to make entire crews flee. Inside the Mercy Dawn, the genius stood silent. The deck shook violently. Fires raged all around him. The ship had given everything. It had nothing left. He knew it would not survive. But he also knew his plan had worked. He looked once more at the map, now filled with empty signals as alien ships retreated. The galaxy had changed. For the first time, aliens who saw humans as weak had felt terror. They had learned that humanity was not to be hunted, not to be mocked. They had learned that even the weakest ship, in the hands of the right human, could bring down giants. The genius smiled faintly. Now they will never forget. In the hidden rooms, survivors cried as the chaos slowed. Doctors held their patience. Nurses hugged children tightly. They had thought death was certain. Instead, they had witnessed a miracle born of desperation and brilliance. The captain, bleeding but alive, staggered to the control room. He saw the genius standing among sparks and smoke. You changed everything," he whispered. The genius did not answer. He did not need to. His work spoke for him. As the alien flagship broke apart, its wreckage drifted across the stars. Flames reflected in the dark, like a warning carved into the night sky. Across the galaxy, sensors captured the event. Across the galaxy, stories began to spread. One human, one hospital ship, one impossible victory. And as the ashes of the battle floated silently into the void, the galaxy trembled, not from the power of humanity's fleets, but from the mind of a single human who had refused to die quietly. The battlefield grew silent. Where once the alien flagship had glowed with power, now only broken pieces drifted across the stars. Flames floated like red clouds in the dark void. The Mercy Dawn, the human hospital ship, hung nearby scarred, cracked, almost torn apart. Yet it still lived. Inside, the survivors held their breath. For hours they had heard screams, explosions, and gunfire. Now, there was nothing but silence. Slowly, people stepped out from the rooms where they had hidden. Doctors carried their wounded. Nurses held children close. They looked around the broken corridors, not believing what they saw. The aliens were gone. The impossible had happened. The captain, weak but standing, made his way to the command deck. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with smoke. He stared at the view screen, at the burning wreck of the enemy flagship. His voice shook. We survived. Around him, his officers cried. Some hugged each other. Others simply sank to the floor, too exhausted to speak. They had been certain of death, yet somehow, they still breathed. And then, all eyes turned toward one man, the genius who had made it possible. He stood quietly, his face pale, his hands blackened with burns. His eyes were sharp but heavy, carrying the weight of every life saved and every enemy destroyed. He had not fought with weapons of war. He had fought with his mind, and that mind had turned despair into victory. The captain whispered, "You saved us all." The genius shook his head. "No," he said softly. "I only showed them that we are not weak." Outside, the alien fleet scattered. Ships fled into the void, spreading news faster than light. Across their worlds, commanders and soldiers whispered in disbelief. "A single human destroyed our flagship. A hospital ship killed us." Fear took root in their hearts. For years, they had believed humans were fragile, easy prey. Now, they saw the truth. If one human could do this alone, what would happen if all of humanity stood together? The galaxy began to tremble, not from human armies, not from fleets, but from the story of one man who had turned weakness into strength. Back on the Mercy Dawn, the survivors gathered in the main hall. The walls were broken, the lights dim, but the people were alive. A nurse placed a hand on the genius's arm. "How did you do this?" she asked. He did not answer at first. He looked around at the wounded, the children, the frightened faces slowly turning into hopeful ones. Finally, he said, "Because they thought we were helpless. They believed kindness meant weakness. They forgot that when humans are cornered, when everything is about to be lost, we become unstoppable." The word spread among the survivors like fire. They would never forget them. For the first time in hours, the stars outside seemed calm again. But it was not true calm. It was the quiet that follows a storm, the quiet before history changes forever. The galaxy had witnessed something it would never erase. In distant systems, traitors, spies, and captains would tell the story. In alien courts, rulers would whisper it in fear. On human worlds, Children would hear it and smile with pride. They attacked a hospital ship, the story would say. But one deadly genius changed the fate of the galaxy. The genius, however, did not seek fame. He walked alone through the broken halls, repairing what little he could. He stopped by the wounded, adjusting machines, giving water, helping with steady hands. To him, this was what mattered, not glory, not power, but life. And yet, deep inside, he knew things would never be the same. The aliens would return one day, stronger, hungrier, but they would come with fear in their hearts. That fear was now humanity's greatest weapon. As the Mercy Dawn limped through space, human rescue ships finally arrived, drawn by the faint distress signals. They docked with the wrecked hospital, carrying supplies, doctors, and soldiers. When they stepped inside, they froze in shock. They had expected to find corpses. Instead, they found survivors, hundreds of them, alive because of one man's mind. The rescue commander looked at the genius and asked, "How did you hold them back? What weapon did you use?" The genius gave a faint smile. "I used the only weapon they never expected, my mind." The survivors cheered softly, their voices filled with pride. For the first time, they felt that humanity was no longer just fighting to survive. Humanity was showing the galaxy something new. Across the stars, fear spread in alien fleets. Across the stars, hope spread among human colonies. And somewhere in the middle, one man stood silent, knowing he had shifted the balance of power forever. The galaxy had thought humans were fragile. The galaxy had thought mercy was weakness. But now, the galaxy knew better. One hospital ship, one deadly genius, one impossible victory. And with it, the fate of the galaxy had changed forever.